Hey, how you doing? So today I want to talk to you guys about a very serious issue that is going on everywhere in the world in many homes and places. Um Sexual abuse. The story I want to tell you is a story of my story of sexual abuse. And before I get started, I just want to say for any boy, girl, whether it's um same sex, opposite sex, if you're being touched in the wrong way, or even if you think that you are, or even if you're told to not think that you are, tell someone. And if for some reason that person doesn't hear you or believe you, you can always speak with a school administrator or counselor or human resources department at work. You know, I think a lot of times when we think about sexual abuse, we think kids. And sexual abuse is actually not only something that happens to kids, it happens every day to grown ups, to teenagers, grown ups, male, female. It could be the most hardcore aggressive person, and it could be the most timid, quiet person that it happens to. Um, with that being said, tell someone. So now I'm going to rewind in time so that I can then begin to tell you my story. I was born in 1976, and I lived with my mom until I was the age of 8. But there were definitely many struggles. I mean, I can remember certain things, and then there's certain things I can't remember. But in living with my mom, I remember it was just seemed like it was always a struggle, and it always seemed like we were moving from place to place, and it always seemed like she was angry. And the only time she wasn't angry was when she was smoking weed and drinking. Now, I was young at that time, so I really don't know or didn't see any of the other drugs, but I remember the little uh, yellow envelopes that back then the weed would come in, um, and the beer bottles, you know, all around the place. And then there was my dad. I never saw do drugs, but he was an alcoholic, and I'm not sure if there was anything else, but I definitely know that what I always saw was Wild Irish Rose. So on, you know, ever so often, I would go and visit my dad, and he never really had his own place much. It was basically like he lived with his grandparents that raised him. And, you know, I used to love going over there. And I don't think it was so much because of my dad, but it was because my aunt, who was my grandparents' biological daughter, and my grandparents were mostly my grandpap. My grandmommy was suffering from dementia, which I really didn't know that back then, but now that you know, as I got older, I knew and I understood that that was what was going on. And So, to be very, very honest with you, I don't know what age the sexual abuse started because it was happening as early as I can remember or have memories. It was a lot of touching, feeling, just exposing, and it was just so much, that went on with that. And then also, what I realized is that I was definitely a part of a process of like basically grooming. Um, and for any of you who don't understand or don't know what that is, it's more so of a tactic that I believe that is used to make you feel comfortable, to make you feel like this sort of isn't a bad thing or this isn't something that you shouldn't be doing. Um, so, I remember once I had a project that I was supposed to be doing. And so my dad promised that he was going to help me with that project and it was due the next day. Well, he basically molested me, you know, and then I went to sleep. So, I was very upset and very scared that, I was going to be a problem when I went to school the next day without my project. Well, wouldn't you know it, the next morning when I woke up, had my bowl of cereal, and here comes my father saying, "Don't forget your project." And to my surprise, he had done the whole project for me. And so that was sort of a way, the way things went, where it was doing things for me that I should have been doing myself, sometimes getting away with things that I shouldn't be doing, um, because of the sexual abuse that was going on. So, this is, and I can't remember whether or not, I was told not to say anything or anything like that. So I can't say. But I remember this one instance. And at this time, my father had actually gotten himself a girlfriend. They moved into a place. So then I would go and visit him there. And so I guess it was the weekend, or I was. It had to. I don't know. I'm not really for sure if it was I was out of school or weekend or what it was. But his girlfriend was going to work. And this particular time, the sexual abuse was so hard on me. I mean, oh, maybe at that time was the first time that he actually penetrated me. And when I say it was the most excruciating pain that I ever felt, even though I have given birth to 4 children, it was the worst pain that I ever felt in my life. The pressure from his body on me, that grown man's penis, and I was at that time maybe 6, going inside of me. It was awful. Awful. I cried the whole time. I mean, I was boo-hooing because it hurt so bad. And then it was over. And I went home. And when I went home, I couldn't use the bathroom without feeling pain. So I guess at some point, we ended up going to the hospital to see what was wrong, what was going on. So the hospital felt the need, I'm young, but I know that this is a part of the process that happens to admit me to the hospital, not just see me and give me medicine and send me home, but admit me. So I'm in the hospital, and I remember it was this weird thing. I don't know what it is still to this day, but it was this weird thing that they rolled in. It was like a chair, and it had it was like a dip in it, and then it was like very warm water, and it was for me to sit in to sort of soothe me because I was in such excruciating pain, and there was so much trauma to my vaginal area. Um, so I remember my father coming to the hospital. He's sitting there and, just talking like, regular. And even though I was little, I was thinking to myself, does he care that he did this to me? So the next day, my mom came, I think it was after work or before work, or maybe she took off or something. I don't really remember the time of day it was, but all I remember was the doctor saying to my mother that it looks as if there was some sexual abuse. And my mother hit the roof. She said those people didn't know what they were talking about. My daughter just came from being with her father. There was no way that this could have happened. And that right there, I was frozen in time, because it was at that time that I realized that, or I felt, not realized, but felt like, if she's acting like that to the doctors, how can I tell her? So I never told her. And so she discharged me. She told me to get out of that bed, get dressed, we getting out of here. They don't know what they're talking about. So we left the hospital, went on as normal, and I still, had to heal and everything because of what had happened to me, but, she never asked me. I never told her or anything like that. As time went on, my mom and I, we still continued to hop place to place. Everywhere we lived, we got evicted from. Sometimes there was not much food to eat, and things like that. So I remember sometimes I wouldn't see her for the whole summer. She would leave me with my sister's father's family for the whole summer. And every day she would promise me that she was coming to get me, but she never came. And so when the time came for school to start back, and she came and got us because it was time to go back to school. And honestly, it was so hard for me because I had thoughts and had seen stuff that I wasn't supposed to see. I was never have supposed to see a man's private parts. I was never supposed to felt a man's private part going inside of me. And, I think that, I was acting a bit promiscuous, to be very honest with you, at a young age. because of it. And that happening to me, it made me hardcore. It really made me tough. Made me have a tough exterior, made me have a tough interior. It made me want to sort of have a persona of someone that was tough, because I don't know, I hurt so much inside, and I just felt that that was what how I wanted to present myself, you know. And anyway, fast forward, it was a weekend that I went to visit one of my aunts who, I didn't really see very often, but I went for a weekend to visit her, and I was 8 years old. And all I know is that going to visit my aunt that weekend turned into me living with her. And then I remember one day, my cousin, my aunt's daughter that I'm now living with, her and I were watching one of those daytime talk shows, and it was on sexual abuse. And my cousin looked at me and she said, "Tamika, has anything like that ever happened to you?" And I specifically told her yes. And I told her that it was my father. I don't really remember or don't know if I went into detail like I'm going into detail right now, but I do know that I told her, and all these years later, that's the worst thing that has ever happened to me. And what I can't realize is that for something like that to have happened to me, how come I never got any type of counseling? Any type of counseling. I just don't understand it now. Then I didn't have any clue that I should have had something like that. I actually thought that the right thing to do was to tell the truth to my cousin, and that was the right thing. Because, like I said before, I wanted to tell my mother, but when I saw how she reacted to the doctors, I felt as if I couldn't. All I know is that so many times in black families, they have so many things, so many secrets, and they have this mentality and this slogan and this saying that says what happens in this house stays in this house, and sometimes that is not a good motto to live by. It's just not. And so I say, um, I really don't know how it came about, but I think I was around 16 or 17 years old. I don't know. And all I know is that my aunt called me and said that the telephone was for me. So I got on the telephone, and it was my mother. And she was yelling, "Tamika, I want you to tell me the truth, and I want you to tell me the truth right now. Did your father ever touch you?" And at that time, I hung my head down low. And even though I was on the phone with her, I flashback to that hospital and her screaming and yelling at those doctors. But now I was 16 or 17 and I had the courage to say to her, yup, you remember that time when I had to go to the hospital? That was because Daddy did that to me. And she said, they told me that. And I thought they were lying. And you know, I think that at that particular point, that probably was a guilt that my mother felt from then on. That, not to mention, she already had addiction problems. But carrying that guilt of knowing that they warned her 10 years ago, and she didn't listen, and she finds out that that was the truth. So, I just say, if you're a victim of abuse, have the courage to just speak up to someone to let them know what's going on. And if you're the ear listening, listen to it, take it for what it's worth, and believe it. So, I thank you for giving me your time, a lending ear to share my story with you. And I hope that it will definitely encourage someone to speak up. This is just one of my stories that I'm going to tell on abuse. You know, for some reason, this one form of abuse actually began a cycle of many different abuses. And I will tell that story to you guys here. So you can like and subscribe to my channel so that you can know when the next one is coming. But thank you for your time and speak up.